All right, well, welcome everyone to today's webinar, The True Measure of Success. It's not just about clicks. Today we're going to be talking about how to measure the value of alumni platforms, connections, and mentorships. Just to run through a quick agenda for the next 45 minutes to an hour, we'll have some brief introductions. We'll introduce our speaker today, and then we'll have a conversation around Georgetown's Hoya Gateway program and how that got started and how Georgetown decided to measure the success of that platform. We're going to leave some time at the end for some Q&As, but I would really encourage everyone to submit your questions during the broadcast. We would love to be able to answer those at certain points and be able to really kind of talk about those questions in real time. Three quick housekeeping items. First, this session is being recorded, and we are happy to share that recording after our conversation today. Second, again, that questions are very encouraged. You can use the questions box to submit those on the GoToWebinar control panel. And third, if you do have any technology difficulties, having trouble hearing me, perhaps seeing my screen, you should be able to see the agenda here now. We would please submit those on the questions box as well. So if there's any technical difficulties, we'll try to manage those as best we can throughout the presentation. So to kick things off, I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Matt Kelly, Business Development Manager here at PeopleGrove. Previous to this role, I was the Associate Director of Alumni Career Services at Georgetown University. And I'm particularly excited today because I have the chance to interview my former boss. Bridget Holmes is the Senior Director of Career and Regional Initiatives. And Bridget, you want to take a moment or two to introduce yourself?
Sure. Excited to chat with everyone today. I have been here at Georgetown in kind of varying, expanding roles over the last 13 and a half years. My position is actually situated within the Office of Advancement and our Alumni Relations team. Prior to coming to Georgetown, I was at Villanova University, so I was in their Career Center, so I've seen kind of both sides of the shop. I know some of your clients may be in different places, whether they be the Career Center or Advancement, and I've kind of seen both sides of that, so happy to answer any questions there. My current purview is Alumni Career Services, which includes our Hoya Gateway program. I also oversee our regional engagement initiatives. We have 65 clubs across the globe. Our Alliances programming for professional interest groups, as well as our John Carroll Weekend. So yeah. Excited to be here and talk about Hoya Gateway, one of my favorite subjects.
Awesome, thank you. To kick things off, I want to just kind of recap the previous webinars we've been doing in this Giving Equation series. Some of you may know that this is part 4 of 5. I will point out also that the 5th part is next Tuesday, October 22nd, and would love you to join us for that. But in the previous 3 webinars, just want to kind of recap some of the content that we've been able to cover. So our concept here at PeopleGrove is providing value, which leads to measurable engagement, which eventually leads to that philanthropic outcome in a gift. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about throughout this series is the concept of time, talent, and treasure. This kind of old adage in the advancement space around what advancement offices are asking alumni to give back to the institution. One of the things that our partners, you might have joined us for our first part of our series where we talked about alumni surveys, one of the things that they identified was they have to really think about what value alumni themselves are asking for from their institution. Surveys from Cal State as well as from the University of Kansas showed that career support and assistance was one of those #1 items that alumni found most important coming out of their alumni association. The importance of that exceeded the performance of the association. And so they invested time, talent, and treasure. The university kind of gave back and thought about, well, what are we giving, what resources are we investing in our alumni to provide that value? In the engagement piece, they have to have some measurable way of being able to say, we are indeed providing that value. So how are they really thinking about the events, the programs, the technology that they're using that engages the alumni to provide that value? And eventually, what you see if you joined us last week with Heather Potts-Brown from Villanova, we talked a lot about some of those philanthropic outcomes that come with the value provided, the engagement measured, the gift outcome. So this is really what we've been focusing on here. This is a chart that we presented in that first part of the series, talking about how the importance of providing career assistance to alumni was actually exceeding the performance at the University of Kansas. And this is some data that they really invested heavily in this survey to learn a lot about what the needs of their alumni were. Interestingly, mentoring students is the second thing that alumni were asking for. As we all know, and we presented again last week with Heather Potts Brown, is that alumni who really feel supported in their career growth were actually 2.6 times more likely to donate when they feel that the Alumni Association is investing the association's time, the association's talent, and of course the financial resources into supporting their alumni continually. The concept of a transaction complete at graduation between student and institution is no longer viable, and we have to really think about providing that value and engaging them in that career-based way. Some of the results that we actually talked about last week with Villanova were some very, very specific and significant giving increases around some of their targeted giving days. So 1842 Day is Villanova's founding year, 1842. So they have a giving day, centered around some of that aspect there, and they really leverage the technology that PeopleGrove provided to have targeted messaging around giving for certain affinity groups, regional clubs, regional chapters, industry-based groups, and raise some really great money for very important initiatives on campus. Would highly encourage you to go back and it's available on our YouTube channel if you weren't able to join us last week, and take a look at some of the success stories that Heather was able to share around Villanova. But I really wanted to kind of pull out these two significant quotes here from that presentation. With advancement offices thinking about large-scale campaigns, often have that 80-20 rule, right, where 80% of the money you're going to raise in a campaign comes from 20% of those donors, those major principal transformative gift levels. Well, that's more like 95.5 or 99.1 at this point. But what Villanova really focused on was that we really wanted to make sure that everyone felt included in their efforts to support the Nova network. And Heather really shared a lot of information about how they targeted, the first-time donors, and how they were proud of the fact that they were able to kind of grow that number, grow the participation on campus, and really engage and cultivate a lot more people in that, bottom annual gift level, so that they can really kind of increase their Nova network in the Nova community, and talked about how Villanovans helped Villanovans. So that presentation is available on our YouTube channel. Would highly recommend you go back and look at that if you're interested in some of those specific success stories. Today's topic, we're going to talk about some of the formation of Georgetown's program called Hoya Gateway here. And we'll talk a lot about how we decided at Georgetown around metrics and measurements, and how we were able to kind of track the engagement piece of that giving equation with three very defined metrics that we were able to kind of track over time. So Bridget, you shared a little bit about your career path coming from Villanova. I'm curious how, from the career side, you jumped from Villanova to Georgetown into more of an alumni side. Interested to learn a little bit more about that path for you. What was it that was most interesting to you about kind of supporting alumni with career and really growing the Alumni Career Services program at Georgetown?
It's interesting. I think all of the factoids that you shared leading up to this, first of all, I want to steal those. I love them because I think it really validates everything that all of us probably on this call already know, which is that alumni really want to see a value. I think with college being so expensive nowadays, parents, when they're looking at institutions with their kids, are looking at it as an investment, not just in the 4 years, but in an investment beyond those 4 years. What's that network going to look like once they leave their institution? And so being at Villanova about 5 years, I did career counseling with students. I worked with some young alumni, did their career fairs, and I loved it, but I was ready for that change. And I didn't really realize just how much I was going to love the alumni side. I think what I like is that there's some of that career path. A lot of the questions that alums have are very much the same as students, to be honest, just kind of in a different take on it. But we also get to figure out for the alums who have been doing things super successfully and have had really interesting, varied careers, how can we engage them back with the university? So it's kind of a new angle, and that has been so much fun. I didn't know I'd be at Georgetown for as long as I have, but it's an entrepreneurial place, and we've been able to build really cool programs like Hoya Gateway. the alums that we continue to find every day, even though I've been here as long as I have, are all doing such amazing things that it makes the work really dynamic.
Great. So you mentioned, talking about an entrepreneurial spirit at Georgetown and the creation of Hoya Gateway. I was wondering if you can take us back to when Hoya Gateway first started and talk a little bit about how that program got formulated.
Yeah, so it's actually a true partnership with one of our volunteer leaders who is on our board and actually chaired our career services committee. So it's kind of a best case scenario. We officially launched Hoya Gateway in 2014, but it was about a year and a half before that we were doing really small curated pilots trying to figure out how to make this work. The volunteer that I worked with, his name's Jeff, had a vision. At Georgetown, we have something called the Alumni Interviewing Program. So every incoming student interviews with an alum. The several thousands of people applying to Georgetown. And so, Jeff's like, wow, you have these students who may or may not matriculate into Georgetown having a really powerful experience with an alum on their way into Georgetown. Why not bookend that with a similarly powerful experience on their way out of Georgetown? And how can we scale that? When I first got to Georgetown, I was a one-person shop as the director of Alumni Career Services. So sustainability is kind of always top of mind for me. And I knew that kind of hand matching in Excel and using Post-its wasn't going to be the solution we needed. At the time, there really wasn't a lot of technology out there that could help make this happen. We were kind of fitting a square peg in a round hole and trying to use different platforms that were meant to actually connect customers with different like handymen and people to come and fix your roof, etc. And we were trying to leverage that technology to do mentoring. It wasn't ideal, but we kind of made it work. We launched Hoya Gateway officially in 2014 with a different platform. And then, goodness, Matt, you'll have to tell me, it was maybe 2-3 years ago now that we launched with PeopleGrove and kind of went into our 2.0 phase. We really liked the additional bells and whistles that PeopleGrove brought to the table in order to make what can be a very flat interaction online come to life. So that was our decision then. There are some founding principles that haven't changed with Hoya Gateway, even though the program has evolved significantly. We knew when we founded Hoya Gateway that we wanted to have a one Georgetown model. We started to hear about different small mentoring programs popping up across campus. We had some folks who really wanted a very curated experience for their small student group or their small group of alumni. And we really feel like the power of the Georgetown network is in the whole Georgetown network. So we wanted to find a solution where it was a one Georgetown, everyone's on the same system, but we could also create sub-communities within the greater whole. And that's part of what PeopleGrove has allowed us to do with their groups model. So that was one of the founding principles. The other thing that we're founded on that we feel really tied to is a brick by brick mentality. So when we started, we wanted to purposely started small. We wanted to have the most active, engaged alumni in our system providing guidance to our students. We wanted the right alums in there. To this day, we still haven't sent out a blast email to all of our alumni asking them to join Hoya Gateway. It's mostly been through word of mouth or partnerships with different organizations and offices and different groups. And we kind of stand by that, and I continue to kind of bang that drum about the brick by brick mentality. So that's a little bit about how we found it. Am I missing anything? You know the story too, so tell me if I'm missing something.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned that I always found interesting about our work was the knowing that different mentorship programs were popping up on campus and being able to incorporate that into the one Georgetown network. And I'm curious if you could share your thoughts just a little bit about how important that was to almost institutionalize that, so that we're talking about metrics today. So if a program's happening in a way that maybe the Alumni Association isn't aware of, how important is it to bring that within a program like Hoya Gateway so that engagement and those metrics are measured and tracked?
Yeah, Yeah, I can't underscore enough how important that is. I think I take a more the merrier approach in life, and I think I apply that to work and especially Hoya Gateway. I think the more reasons we are giving people to come to Hoya Gateway, the better. I think that makes the system more powerful, it makes the connections more powerful. The technology, honestly, all these little student groups or alumni groups that are across campus or out there, they aren't using this powerful technology, and so if we can bring them in, they can amplify their efforts, so it's a win-win. We've worked across campus with places like our entrepreneurship initiative, where they have an entrepreneurs in residence and experts on call program, where literally they were using Google Docs and kind of creating by hand a system for that expert on call to connect with a student. We went to them and said, we have technology that can make this so much easier. And then we worked with PeopleGrove to figure out, okay, well, what exactly could this look like? And it's been a win-win. Like, that's one more reason for that set of students and for those alums to be leveraging Hoya Gateway, which means they're going to be more responsive, which means they're going to make more connections. And that's just one example. I was in a meeting yesterday where I've started to use the term, like, Hoya Gateway is the official networking platform of the Georgetown University Alumni Association. We're just going to keep banging that drum to try and get all of this into one place and make it a one-stop shop for all of these networking connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing about the founding of Hoya Gateway too that I think is interesting and maybe a little bit different than what we've seen across the board at PeopleGrove is how the program was originally funded. So I know many are probably thinking and hearing you talk about the effort that went into rolling the program out in general, let alone the platform. Can you talk a little bit about how, you know, the Advancement Office, the Alumni Association, others partnered together to kind of provide the funds for that?
Yeah, so we have kind of three sources of funds that help support Hoya Gateway, which I think speaks to just the need and want from our alumni and from our students, because I think as a lot of us in higher ed can attest to, like, getting three groups to all identify with the same goal can be challenging. We had an alum, Charles Cawley, who was a huge supporter of our Career Center. He was a huge believer in the power of the Georgetown network, hired, I think people lost count of how many Hoyas he hired in his very long, very storied career at MBNA. He passed away, and his daughter, in his memory, created an endowment, some of which has funded our Cawley Career Education Center, and some of which went to Hoya Gateway. And the people that he mentored and hired throughout his time after he left the Hilltop felt so strongly in his legacy that they've all contributed to that endowment. So that happened, and at the same time, I was working with Jeff on this concept, and our Alumni Association knew that this was going to be important and powerful for them. I don't know that we had the statistic that Matt gave in the beginning, but we all had this gut feeling that career services and mentorship are a strong, it's how people want to engage. It's one of the number one ways people want to engage. So the Alumni Association funding combined with our endowment is really what got us off the ground. And since we've been able to build in a programmatic budget from our Office of Advancement, so it's a true trifecta between all three of those entities, which has been amazing, lucky. It gives us the staff member in order to help make Hoya Gateway happen, which I think is really important.
Great, thank you. Before we dive into some of the technology and the metrics, we're getting a few questions here, which is great, and we'll make sure that we get to those questions as we go. But Bridget, you have this wonderful philosophy that I think would be great to share around the use of technology. So you outlined the goals for Hoya Gateway, and it was really, you know, Jeff's idea to institutionalize that alumni touch point as students are coming out the door, right? That bookend as in their student experience. And you know that many people you could have chosen a lot of different ways to do that, and you decided on a technology platform as kind of the core tenet of the larger program that is Hoya Gateway. So I'm wondering if you could share, you know, some of the reasons why technology was so important to that work.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about sustainability. I always joke around that, like, my team, we're all in the masses and messes, right? We want to engage as many people as effectively as possible in order to support whatever campaign we're in and the campaign to follow. And so I knew if we wanted to create a legacy program that would have a lasting impact on, I mean, to be honest, future generations of Hoyas, it needed to be sustainable, and it couldn't be dependent on a person or people kind of creating these matches. I also have a strong philosophy about mentorship, where I think it's really difficult to always match people for chemistry, right? Like someone may be, in the dream job, but might not be that future mentor. I also think, someone may not realize they're your mentor, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be a signed piece of paper. And so I wanted to create a platform for people to find that mentor. And the platform was what's going to make it sustainable. And then what we've been able to do is take the staff person who's dedicated to Hoya Gateway to help bring that platform to life. And that is, they're kind of in the platform constantly. We have an executive committee of alumni who are up leading the program, so they're working with them. And then we're also doing supplemental in-person events that help bring that to life and directly to the students on campus. We give what we try to do through those events is give them a taste of how awesome it is to talk with these alums, and then drive them back to the platform in order to make even more connections. So that's kind of why we decided on technology. I think, one of the reasons we decided to switch to PeopleGrove is because while it's a technology platform, it's more colorful than a flat database. When I arrived here 13 and a half years ago, we had a flat database. You could search it, but that was about it. I feel like with any database, as soon as you drive it off the lot, it's out of date. People get bounce backs, they forget they joined, all those things. And we didn't want to recreate that. We wanted to create a dynamic ecosystem, and the different technology tools that we are able to use in PeopleGrove allows us to make it much more of a dynamic, interactive platform. Technology is interesting. I think with the rise of social media and the use of technology, we're all always on our phones. It's so incredibly important, but I think that people also are really craving that in-person contact. So one of our thoughts is, well, let's match them through the technology, but let's have the alum and the student take that in the world. So we're really encouraging one-on-one conversations, ideally in person, but some of those happen via video chat, and that's great too. So people are taking our technology but bringing it to life in their own way.
Great, yeah, I really appreciate that. And I can also share as an aside, I haven't shared this with you yet, Bridget, but I really enjoyed coming back to Georgetown last month for one of those events that you spoke about that drives people to the platform. It was our Ready, Set, Connect event. And I've already connected with 2 or 3 of the students that I met at that event through the Hoya Gateway platform in my own capacity as an alum of Georgetown. So it's great to see how the technology is being used both to initially make those connections, but also then to continue those connections, once I returned back to San Francisco and the students are still in Washington. So it's been really cool to see that from my side now, attending an event that I used to manage.
Well, that's one thing we tell the alums, actually, not to bring business cards to that event. We want them to tell the students to find them in Hoya Gateway if they want to follow up. And I feel like, good, I'm glad to see that's working.
Yeah. Well, we have a number of questions on the board here about kind of the structure of the Hoya Gateway platform itself. So maybe, Bridget, if you could just give us a little bit of a rundown of what Georgetown is leveraging in terms of the tools in PeopleGrove. I can also chime in with anything that I can share from my own experience, having been on that side as well. But can you tell us what Hoya Gateway is doing in terms of the usage of the technology?
Yes, and I may have you add, because I'm not as in the weeds in the tech world as I once was when we built it. But I'd say the biggest thing, the most prolific thing we're using, in addition to just the platform itself, the algorithm, all of that, the meeting request, is the groups. And so we've done, I think, a pretty good job of reaching out to student groups across campus, some of our initiatives like our alliances, to create, as I mentioned before, the sub-community. So we have a Georgetown entrepreneurship sub-community. We have a sub-community for students and alumni who were part of our student newspaper so that they can connect. I think that's by far the most prolific and powerful that we've used so far. It gives those, I think everyone wants to feel like it's theirs. And, with our student newspaper, they really wanted to create their own platform, not realizing how difficult it is, how expensive it is, like all the work that goes into it and what's necessary. And so we're able to basically give them their own platform, but it's part of a bigger ecosystem. So it's a win-win. They're able to see all of the alumni who opt in, they may not have known our alumni of the Hoya. They can, and it's a true partnership too. They can reach out to the alums that they know of who are part of the Hoya. They help us sustain the discussion boards and the AMAs and all of that. So that's definitely the most prolific. We're in the process right now of partnering with our law center to create a hub, which is new and exciting for us. Our hope is that we expand our hubs to reflect each of our schools within Georgetown. So we'll have kind of the overall platform, our hubs, and then our groups. And let's see, we're working with our entrepreneurship initiative to see if we can launch the advising platform, which I think will just amplify that experts on call model that we were discussing. Just had a meeting last week with folks in our Designing the Future of Higher Education initiative to see how we can leverage the actual longitudinal mentoring piece, and if we can turn that on. And then we're also going to be in the next couple weeks, I think, turning on the alumni to alumni job boards.
So job boards will. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that the flash mentoring matching, the groups, I think the job boards is a brand new addition, which is exciting. That definitely answers one of the questions we have on our board. And one of the other things, and I think there's some questions we might get to later that are currently on the board, but I think that engagement piece is something that we might be able to discuss now. You talked about the bells and whistles that we're able to provide with PeopleGrove technology that keep people engaged. Could you elaborate a little bit on what we're currently doing there to make sure people are coming back to the platform?
Yes. And I want you to add in from the tech side. But one thing that was really important to us was just that all of the communication flowed through the system, but met our alums and our students where they are, which is normally in their inbox, right? So that connectivity between the platform and the inbox is really important to us. So people are getting the notifications, but then it's kind of pushing them back into the system. I would say, the other thing that I really think is cool that maybe seems obvious, but I feel like it's underrated, is our ability to deep link to someone's profile. So for people like our experts on call that I keep mentioning, I really love that we're finally partnering with them. We finally are getting it right. Not only do we have this kind of group of experts within their entrepreneurship group, but they can then create tiles for each of the experts on call and deep link them to Hoya Gateway, so that they're sending from there. We're basically hitting people from two angles, right? They either join the Georgetown Entrepreneurship group and see these experts on call and reach out to them, or they're going to the Georgetown Entrepreneurship website, they're seeing the experts on call, and then deep linked directly to Matt Kelly or whoever's Hoya Gateway profile. And I know that seems silly, but I feel like that's super important, and I really like that. What else am I missing? We're talking about driving people back to the platform. Yep.
I think one of the things that actually was your idea, Bridget, was badging.
Oh yeah, that was a good idea that I had. I'm so proud of myself that I forgot. Will you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, one of the things that
we implemented it.
One of the things we thought of and suggested was a mechanism for recognizing volunteers who engaged on the platform, and then letting these students, the knowledge seekers, know who those folks were. So by implementing a simple system where we could say, oh, you've had your first meeting, here's a little badge on your profile. You might be familiar with this concept and other things you might use along, like Fitbit was one thing, or Apple Watch Fitness, where you get certain rewards along the way that just keep you engaged and keep you going. One of the things, and we implemented that within the system so that we could have a way of measuring alumni engagement while also rewarding the alumni volunteers, and finally letting the students know who was amongst the best of the best in terms of our volunteers. So another piece of engagement that also drove folks back. The other thing was text message notifications as well. You mentioned people being on their phones. the ability for students to get notified via text when there is a new message request or something that drives them back to the platform is important as well.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to the badging. We wanted the alums to not feel like they were a part of a big database and they were just a name and, you know, of 1,000 or whatever. And so we wanted them to see that we see what they're actually doing and that they're actually a committed and engaged member of the community. And yeah, I can't believe I forgot about that. That was a great idea.
It was. Cool. Well, let's switch gears a little bit to the metrics. We do have some questions on our question board here about the judging of success and how we are seeing, you know, from the user sign up basis to some of the other things that we look at with Hoya Gateway. So Bridget, could you elaborate a little bit on how we came up with the key metrics that we are using to kind of judge success with Hoya Gateway?
Yeah. Really to think back because now it's so institutionalized that I was like, oh wow, like how did we think about that? So thinking back to when we started, I mean, I think I'm proud of us because the kind of obvious metric for us to be tracking at the time would have been how many alumni are in the system and how many students are in the system. I mean, that's how we, you know, in alumni relations, a lot of times, like that's what we're looking at for our measures of success for our events. Did 100 people show up or did 20 people show up? It doesn't really, you know, now I think we're much more sophisticated in the world of alumni relations to think about, okay, well, you know, how did the event land? But for the most part, we're looking at raw numbers. And we do look at that. We track it, absolutely. But our three kind of key pieces that are driving force behind the platform are the number of meeting requests, and we look at that annually and cumulatively. The response rate, so how many requests that go out are actually being responded to, whether that be yes or no. And then also the acceptance rate, how many alums are saying yes to that meeting request. And it goes back to, and kind of knits it all together, it goes back to the fact that we really wanted to create the most active and engaged alumni community. And that's how we're looking at it. We know if our meeting requests are down, that's not good. We got to be either pushing our marketing or we need to be doing a better job working with our partners. We need to be talking more about the different functionality of the system. Let's see, last fiscal year, we had over 2,300 meeting requests. And then cumulatively, we've had over 6,700. And so we just want to keep seeing that number go up and up and up. One of the things that we then keep track of as our alumni, the number of alumni in the system grow, we really want to keep track of that response rate and make sure that the students or alumni, if they're requesting a meeting, are getting a response. And that's where we've done some work with our executive committee. Obviously, the technology helps us, but you know, we leverage our alums to do reminders to people by industry. Say, hey, it looks like you got a meeting request a couple weeks ago. Make sure you're responding. Let's make it really easy. So those are kind of the core things. Other things that we're looking at that, you know, I think are good indicators of health within the system are obviously the number of alums and the number of students, but more specifically the industries that are represented within the system. So we want students to see when they log into our system is a really diverse array of alumni from a variety of perspectives, including industry. So we do keep an eye on that. When we launched Hoya Gateway, we very specifically targeted only 5 cities, and I think it was 7 industries. And we've since expanded from that, but we wanted to go deep in those and kind of get our sea legs before we expanded. So we're kind of keeping our eye on that as well. We have soft launched alumni to alumni connections. So we're keeping our eye on that. But our core mission is still really students, and we're going to lean into the alums in the next year or so a little bit more heavily. I think that going back to partnerships across campus, those are things that I think are another health indicator. How many people are we partnering with? How many people are we providing solutions for in terms of the mentorship programs or networking programs that they're doing across campus? How many people are we bringing under our tent? To me, is also a very important health indicator.
Yeah, the focus on partnerships was always a big piece of how we were able to grow awareness on campus, let alone get users in the system. We do have a question up on our board here about that brick by brick approach and why the user number wasn't necessarily like the key metric for us. And I think you spoke about that in terms of the ability to make sure that there was a responsive, active community that students knew and felt confident that they would get their help on Hoya Gateway when they needed it. But when you marketed it to that initial 5 cities, 7 industries, or even continually today when we bring on a new partner to Hoya Gateway and then market to their students and alumni, what kind of a adoption rate are we seeing with some of those students signing up? What percentage, if you could guess, do you see that instantly say, yes, this is something that I'm interested in and want to raise my hand for?
Gosh, that's a tough question. I don't know. I can look at kind of what some of our percentages are and maybe get back to you. I'm trying to think. I know one of our most successful examples is with our Entertainment and Media Alliance. It was because it's kind of a professionally affiliated group of alums. It has a longer history at Georgetown. It's been around at least a few years before I even got here. So maybe been around 15, 20 years. Strong network of people. I remember being very, very, very pleasantly surprised at the uptick of alumni who engaged with the platform as a result of just that one email blast, that one very, very specific community. And not only, it wasn't really the volume of numbers, again, that I was really excited about. It was the quality of the kind of diversity in career paths. CEOs of companies or chief marketing officers at really cool film and media affiliated organizations, people that I knew our students would really find value in connecting with. So it was really the quality over quantity. So I'm sorry to say I don't really have a good sense of adoption numbers.
I think that's a wonderful example. I also think the another one was the Veterans Association that I thought was another great launch where we had a really strong interest. And I think finding that affiliation based type of messaging and that partnership to bring them on as a group onto the platform, or if they're looking to run a formal mentoring program through the platform, that's a really key way of seeing very high percentage adoption because they're already engaged in those activities. And now it's just another way that they can raise their hand and continue their engagement.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how, as the program's been around now, going back to its initial, 2013, 2014 pilots, how have the kind of the metrics of success really driven some of the strategies that you've implemented around engagement?
That's a great question. Trying to think. It's a good question. I feel like there's a lot to say, so I'm trying to think. So I'll talk a little bit too about what we're planning for the future. We are really looking at, so I mentioned before that we have an executive committee that helps drive the future of the program. There are kind of our ambassadors who are out there talking about Hoya Gateway, getting their friends to join Hoya Gateway. We are looking at kind of is there a multiple tier approach? So right now it's either you join Hoya Gateway and you're a member of Hoya Gateway, which is great. But then then there's the executive committee, about 8 to 10 people. What's that mid-level? Like, how do we source the people who are most passionate and engaged from our overall alumni kind of user pool to create some leadership opportunities so that they can then become the next future executive board? And again, it kind of was mirrored after our alumni interviewing program. They have a very strong kind of volunteer hierarchy by city and region and things. And so we want to model that in order to kind of create more engagement. Again, leveraging the technology, but bringing it to life through some of these volunteer opportunities. We're also looking at, just in order to institutionalize the engagement, formalizing this as like a requirement for some of our professional alliances that already exist or coming on board. We are going to be reinvigorating our student ambassador committee, not that you're familiar with, so that we have kind of students who are mirroring our executive committee. We want to have those students who are feet on the street, talking to all of these student groups, who are helping to table and drive student engagement. I think one of the challenges with students is networking is sometimes most of the time it's a nice to have, but not a requirement. It's not, that next paper that's due or that next fun event that they have. So as much as we can be driving those students to the platform and leveraging it and talking about the importance of it, the better, and creating some of those kind of opportunities for them to make time for that networking before it's a crisis point and their parents are nagging them about their internship or their job. So those are some of the things. If I'm missing something, tell me though.
One of the questions that we have on the board here is about, you mentioned alumni to alumni networking. You talk about the future of the program. And we've talked a lot about how Hoya Gateway has done a lot of work to meet the specific needs of students, especially around some of their industry affiliation or even geographical affiliation. Can you talk a little bit about the difference, if there is one, between your young alumni, your mid-level, senior level folks, and some of the needs we're trying to meet there through alumni to alumni engagement? Are we separating that at all in terms of our messaging and marketing or strategies? Anything you might be able to share around the alumni to alumni launch would be helpful.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, I feel like unfortunately, PeopleGrove stole Matt, so we had a little pause until we hired someone recently. And so our alumni to alumni, as I mentioned, has kind of not been front and center as much as it should be, and it will be in the next year. I would say the one thing that I think is going to be a key driver this year for our alumni to alumni engagement is the alumni job board that we're going to be launching. So we're specifically launching the job board just for alumni to post jobs for other alumni. Job postings are super decentralized at Georgetown. We have about 6 career centers. They all use their own systems. They don't talk to each other. We want to be the one that anyone can use at any time for alumni job postings. And I think that's going to be a core differentiator for us. We then take those job postings and push them out through our social channels using a hashtag, use hashtag hire a Hoya, that then drives people back to the platform. So let's say Matt posts, business development person, associate at PeopleGrove in Hoya Gateway. We're actually taking that, pushing it out through our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter channels that deep links that job posting back to Hoya Gateway. So I think it's going to kind of have a flywheel effect once we launch that, and I think that's going to be a key differentiator for us, and it's going to really drive the alumni to alumni. And then we'll worry kind of more about the marketing. The alumni to alumni is also going to be driven through our groups. Like our entrepreneurs really want to connect with each other. Our alums who are part of our GSP program really want to network with each other, not just with students, but with each other as well. So that's going to be another key driver. Let's see. I think for young versus older, what I think is nice is now that Hoya Gateway's been around since 2014, we have students graduating who have only known life with Hoya Gateway, right? And they've used it and then want to pay it forward by becoming an alum. And we do transfer our students over to be alums. If they choose, they can opt out of that and they can kind of be a part of that virtuous cycle then. Anything you would add, Matt?
No, I think the core setup of the foundational program being that kind of informational interview flash mentoring type of capability allows kind of the user to pick their own needs essentially. So if you have that young alum who is looking to network with that senior level alum, or maybe a senior level alum who's looking to grow their own network to do business or anything, or moving to a new city, you can do that based on the needs that you have personally with the tool that's been provided. So there's not necessarily a differentiator there, I think, but it's really self-selecting in terms of choose your own adventure networking, as you'd love to say, Bridget.
Yeah. I will also add we're trying something new. This is very granular, but hopefully helpful. We're trying something new with our Law Hub launch, where we're actually going to have, I think it's on the student side, we're basically creating the accounts and having people activate the accounts versus kind of start from scratch, and we're hoping that that helps. Not that there's a large barrier to entry, but anything we can do to reduce that friction, we're going to try it. We're going to pilot it and see how it goes, and hopefully that creates, more people who are able to be a part of this big network too.
Yeah, and from a technical aspect, just to kind of fill that in as well, all that really is a pre-data upload on the PeopleGrove side. It's really just an email address with the name and hopefully your CRM ID number, so that all that data can be tracked and matched. And then when an alum joins, they're automatically auto-approved for the site, and they don't have to be kicked to some approval queue where a staff member might have to go and ensure that they are a member of the community before allowing them access to the platform. So fill that in very quickly there. I do have one last topic for you, Bridget, before we kick off and look more deeply here into the questions box. But one of the things that we have talked about a lot were the metrics and how we're measuring the overall success. One of the things that we've been talking about on this webinar series as well is aligning engagement and giving. So if you could share how kind of the reporting for Hoya Gateway works. I know there's a couple different stakeholders involved, like the Alumni Association and the Office of Advancement. And I think there is some unique reporting that happens with Hoya Gateway for both parties. So if you could share a little bit about how our stakeholders at Georgetown really see the program, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. Okay, hopefully this isn't long-winded because I have a few things to say here.
Yeah.
First is that we do take all of our alumni who join Hoya Gateway, and we code them in our alumni system of record, so that if a development officer is meeting with an alum, they can see that they're a member of Hoya Gateway, how long they've been a member of Hoya Gateway, et cetera. So I think that's great. We are working with our internal team, and we'll be working with PeopleGrove to hopefully make that a more automated process in the future. We're moving to Salesforce platform, and PeopleGrove and Salesforce can magically talk somehow. I'm not going to pretend to know the details, but all I know is it'll make our lives so much better from a data perspective and from a reporting perspective. We won't have to do as much by hand. We are looking at our alums in Hoya Gateway, how many of them are giving and what their giving totals are for all alumni in Hoya Gateway. I don't have the data off the top of my head, but those are important things to track. I think we also are becoming a solution for DOs. We hear, I think, development officers, alumni relations people also, you hear from alums like, I want to meet with a student, I want to mentor a student, I want to have this experience and connecting with a student, and we're the solution for that too. So partnering with DOs to tell alums about Hoya Gateway. That's also why I really want to create this more robust leadership structure, so that for those people who are very, very passionate, they can be part of the leadership group who's helping to drive forward the platform. And so that's why that's one of our goals for the year as well. But I think as much as we can be tying our work to giving, the better, the more impact we're showing. We also push out all of our giving challenges, Giving Tuesday, our Blue and Gray Day, all out through Hoya Gateway as well, with a softer ask, just saying, hey, thank you to all of the alums who have raised their hand to make themselves available for fellow alums and students. You are the ones who are making the Georgetown network strong. In honor of Giving Tuesday or in honor of Blue and Gray Day, consider making a gift to help pay it forward for future generations, things like that. So we are programmatically aligning ourselves with giving as well, which I think is important. So yeah.
Great. And one of the other things that I have seen in my work in reporting on Hoya Gateway was that in terms of aligning with giving, typically when you have a volunteer in Hoya Gateway, we look at kind of that participation rate of all of our volunteers to say, well, what percentage of the volunteers gave? And try to think about like, how is that affecting our overall giving, and also, are we measuring ourselves against other engagement activities that could be valuable across the campus to see whether or not this is one that really makes a difference in giving. And Bridget, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but typically it has made an impact in that type of, when we see a larger percentage of volunteers give in an annual campaign versus the main campus giving rate.
Yeah, I mean, yes, just to underscore what you're saying, if let's just say and it's around this, our overall undergraduate alumni giving rate is 35%, and we look at our undergraduate alumni who are in Hoya Gateway, typically the percentage is much higher. Is that correlational? Is that causational? I think we'd have to do some fancy statistical regression analysis to find out. But that statistic alone does tell you that there is at least a relationship. And so it provides value. And hopefully now that we have actually more data within the PeopleGrove system, we can start to do a little bit more sophisticated analysis of what that looks like. And I think will be exciting.
Great. Well, that's all for me. I'm going to pause with my questions here. We do have a number on the board and we have about 10 minutes left, but I think the number one topic of interest here is the management of it all. So we have a number of questions around the staff and kind of the time that has gone into Hoya Gateway. So Bridget, could you talk a little bit about how your team is structured to support this program?
Sure, and it's changed a bit since Matt departed. So I have a senior associate director of alumni career services under me who oversees our overall alumni career services program, our webinars, our social media, our coaching program. We have a myriad of services we provide to alums. And our assistant director, I was trying to think since we switched it, assistant director of alumni career services reports directly into that person. And the assistant director is the one who manages the day-to-day operations of Hoya Gateway. So she's the one who's continually meeting with our friends at PeopleGrove to talk about how we're optimizing the technology. She's meeting with our cross-campus partners. She's planning events and activities throughout the year to help amplify our efforts. She's working with our executive committee, alumni who are helping to drive the program, our social media efforts to help drive the program, etc. So she is 100% focused 100% of the time on Hoya Gateway, which I know it's for some of you is probably a luxury, and I think it's been critical in our success in that it's helped bring the program to life. The technology is amazing and it does a lot of the work, but as much as you can have someone who's kind of giving it that water and fertilizer and seeds and all of that good stuff to make it grow, the better. And so it's been a game changer for us.
A great question here around the implementation of alumni to alumni. Is or was there, and continues to be perhaps, a concern that if alums now have the ability to network with each other, that they are only signing on to the platform for their own self-interested purposes, and they would be less interested in perhaps connecting with students?
Can't even tell you the hours we talked about this. Matt and I had many long conversations about this, and I think we came to a good place where we're giving alumni a choice. Are you interested in networking with fellow alums? Are you interested in making yourself available to students? And you can decide. Again, that going back to that core metric of the response rate, we were not willing to sacrifice a strong response rate. And that's part of the reason, to be honest with you, that we've gone so slow with our alumni to alumni connections. Our core mission was founded on student to alumni. The natural extension of that was alumni to alumni. But our endowment and that preliminary mission, we feel strongly tied to, with alumni being an addition, and we didn't want it to be a detriment to the students. So we'll continue to monitor it, but I think we worked really closely with PeopleGrove to figure out a strategy as to how to make that happen in a way that wouldn't sacrifice some of our core deliverables.
And I think one of the core principles you talked about earlier was that sense of volunteerism and that sense of giving. And I think that one of the things that we landed on when we had that conversation was the fact that no one could sign up just for their own self-interested purposes without at least giving something back to the community. So you mentioned giving alumni the choice. Do you want to be available to students, to alumni, or to both? We required them to make a choice. There was no none option.
That wasn't I just want to take and not give. You got to give to get in this system. So
right.
yes, thank you for.
And that also goes back to that brick by brick strategy too, because if you make this very clearly a volunteer opportunity where there is some sense of giving involved, you want those responsive alums. You want people. You might not get the huge swath of users that you might get if you just emailed everyone and said you can log on and do it for yourself. But we're saying this is a give and take system essentially. You want to be able to give back to the community as well.
Yeah, it's only going to be as strong as what everyone contributes to it.
Absolutely. Just taking a quick look at the platform here, or at the questions. I'm hoping there's a couple more technical questions here around things around some of the way that the pieces are implemented. I think, Bridget, maybe we'll finish off with this one around marketing and around some of the messaging. What was the process around kind of the awareness and maybe you could speak a little bit about how we originally formed those partnerships with some of those organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really out kind of pounding the pavement. It was reaching out to what are some of our larger, more active student groups. Let's go, let's sell them on the system, let's demo the system, let's show them that it's no longer kind of the clunky dinosaur that it was when we launched. It's much more savvy and sophisticated and has way more interesting features that make it a much more personalized experience. And so it was really one-on-one every time. We got to go sell, you got to go sell, you got to go sell. And same with our alumni groups, and we're still selling to our alumni groups. They ask like, well, why this versus LinkedIn? And I'm like, okay, let's sit down because I've got a whole half hour of reasons to tell you why this is the system that you should be using. So it's really it's a lot of relationship building, which is by hand. And I know isn't kind of the easiest answer, but I think it's the most honest. Do you want to add anything, Matt?
Well, I also think it's the most effective. I think when you have that leadership relationship with someone who runs a student group, or even with the career center on campus to get this in front of students, if you have that ability to build a strategy together to make sure that this constituents you're reaching out to understand the value of something like this compared to a LinkedIn. It's really important to build that relationship, and that I think is the most effective way versus a barrage of communication that might be more generalized to many different groups. So I think that you're right. It was that pounding the pavement that really made that successful.
We wanted to create shared ownership too, right? Like, as great as it is that we have one person, like it is still only one person, right? And it's 1,000,001 student groups and plethora of alumni groups, so we can only get so far. If we can create a shared sense of ownership with that group that we're partnering with, and they feel invested in Hoya Gateway, and they feel invested in the success of their group and the activity of their group, it's a rising tide raises all ships. So we wanted to create that co-ownership in order to make it as successful as we could.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think with about 2 minutes to the top of the hour, I think we will end it there. I do notice that there are some more technical questions up there on the board around some of the structure of the Georgetown platform, along with some pricing questions. And I'll be sure that either myself or someone from the PeopleGrove team will be in touch with you individually to make sure you get the answers to those questions. But I want to thank all the attendees today. I really appreciate your engagement, appreciate all the questions, especially want to thank Bridget. It was a ton of fun for me to interview my former boss and a mentor of mine. So with National Mentor Day coming up, I want to thank you, Bridget. And I really appreciate your time today. Remind everyone to tune in to our next webinar next Tuesday. And once again, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.